want to start the recording with a big heart behind me, and I got a big heart in front of me. I have T.S. Monk. Hey, T.S., how are you?
Good, Paul. How are you doing?
All right, good. This is a big honor for me. Many years ago, I hope you remember, in my studio on 18th and 5th Avenue, we had a jazz consideration for you to be our jazz educator. We did a video. It's a long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, and you were our host. I don't know if you remember that. I have the video. It might escape you because it practically escaped me.
It does escape me, but it's too many gigs. And then I did so many things as chairman of the Monk Institute, when I was in my jazz educating mode. It's just a wonderful history. And I always say, if I wasn't a drag, as my father would say, if I wasn't a drag, then everything is cool,
So for those that you have to, something about the jazz, let's call it jazz slang, or let's call it slang, right? We're going to define what a drag is. A drag is sort of like a pin in the neck. What do you call a drag?
A drag, for young people today, a drag is, like my bad.
Yeah.
That's what, like my daughter and my son, when something doesn't go well, they say, oh, my bad, and a drag is like my bad, and my father, I got that from my father because, a drag was something that dragged you down, So my father and Art Blakey and, all them cats that I grew up around, they would say things like, oh man, I went to see so-and-so, man, he was a drag, So you don't want to be a drag.
You never wanted to be a drag, but and it wasn't I'm bad, I'm good. Wasn't at one point I'm good means you're bad, or you're bad means you're good? Don't the young people have that?
There was definitely a period where you're bad. If he was a badass, he was good. It's funny how all this slang, all this colloquial slang over the decades, one of the things I love about America is that we change words into anything we want it to be, So, now, and I remember, being bad was being good, and I mean, you could go on a list of 100 different words that means so many different things, which is probably why Native Americans said, white man speak with forked tongue, because, a word in American, forget English, in American can mean like 10 different things. I love you, or I love that can mean I really like that, but it can also mean I don't like it at all, It's just crazy.
You are the educator. That's why I recollect through our good mutual friend, Sandra Trentacosta. She introduced us a zillion years ago.
Yes,
yes. And that was a big honor. And we're still broadcasting 23 years later. We have about 6,000 shows now, TS. Your name came up recently again, because we've been doing this Peace Day events in Central Park and Times Square and some other locations. We're going to have a concert this year as well. But we do concerts in Times Square for the International Day of Peace. So I'm possessed with this peace. I'm trying to pause the world for peace. That's my dream. At 12 noon, the United Nations, 193 countries, they raised their hands and said, we're going to have a day of peace. And at 12 noon, we're going to pause. We're going to have a ceasefire where everything's going to hug and love and calm ourselves down. So we keep going with that mindset, and then we keep going with the good news. But your name came up because I spoke actually to someone who thought the world of you. In fact, I had told him, because Sandra told me, you had some medical things that you were dealing with. And his name is Danny Shearer. He loved you, loves you. And,
I love him too.
And
I love him too. He is he's someone that we had about a year and a half ago, we released a never heard a previously unreleased recording of my father that Danny Shearer had actually made when he was 16 years old.
Oh my God.
And I told Danny, I said, it probably happened because my father loved kids. And this kid calls him up and says, I want to hire you, Mr. Monk, to do a concert in Palo Alto, which was going through a very tumultuous period racially at that point in 1968, that really the height, the crescendo of the civil rights period, because Dr. King and Malcolm and Bobby Kennedy and all these people had been murdered, and so it was a very tough time in America. And the African American community in Palo Alto was so disenchanted that they had a campaign to rename East Palo Alto Nairobi, right? They were going total Africa. They were going totally back to Africa, But this young kid, called Monk up personally, which most adults were afraid to do, but he did it, and Monk responded, and then Danny, of course, went on to have a wonderful career as a promoter, working with the likes of Bill Graham and others, George Wein, people like that, and then he found this recording that he had made, and myself and a very close friend, Grand Mixer DXT, restored the recording, and it was the biggest jazz recording a year and a half ago, and so Danny is very, very special to me and to the Monk family, and I think to the jazz community, because I think that little piece of history that took place on an obscure Sunday afternoon out in Palo Alto ended up being very, very important, not only for the memory of Thelonious Monk, but of course, because of what it represented, politically in that area of Palo Alto. And, this young Jewish kid found it necessary to try in his own way, to make America a better place. And that's always special. And if you're thinking like that at 16, you don't ever stop thinking like that. So Danny is really important.
There you go. Well, he felt the same about you, and it's all good. Let's get to your most recent outreach here. You're back on the charts here. T.S. Monk, 2 continents, 1 groove.
Yeah.
And so you got some superstars on this recording. Tell us about it.
Well, this is a live recording, which I have to tell you, Paul, that I have not been a fan of live recordings. Most live recordings, they're terrible. Either they're terrible acoustically, or you didn't get the best performance from the artist that you love. There are only 2 jazz artists that I know consistently made great live records. One was Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and the other one was Cannonball Adderley, and Cannonball Adderley actually had several live recordings that actually became hits. So I wasn't a fan of live recordings, but considering the pandemic, I said, I got to put something out. And I hadn't put anything out for almost 14 years, which is one of the wonderful things about jazz. If you're a really good jazz artist, you can work, whether you have a record or not, as opposed to the days when I was an R&B artist. And if you're an R&B artist or hip hop artist, if you ain't got nothing on the charts, you can't work. Which you can work if you're a good jazz artist. And I like to say I've been a pretty good jazz artist for the past almost 27 years now, leading my band. And So I said, I listened to these recordings and I said, wow, these are like really, I got some hot performances here. The band, it's called Two Continents, One Groove, and most people think when you say the word groove, they think that's referring to the music. But for me, that wasn't really referring to the music. That was referring to the actual band itself. Because, sometimes, I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but I have. You hear somebody in California and you say, man, the band sounded fantastic. Then you hear the same band in New York and you say, wow, they didn't sound like they sounded in California, But this recording was recorded, part of it was recorded at a place called Ginny's in a place called the Red Rooster in Harlem in New York City. And another part of the record was recorded at a club called Mary Ann's in Bern, Switzerland, right? And it's the same band, and everybody brought their A game, and they would, not only that, but they were recorded maybe 2 years apart. Wow. So I said, wow, this is kind of special here, I think. And then, Duke Ellington said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And when I listened to the recordings, I said, man, we swinging, we swinging big time. And so I said, let me throw it out there, because my father always said, either you dig me or you don't. It's that simple. And jazz requires a certain measure of courage. You got to believe in yourself, And when I listened to these recordings, I said, man, we are swinging big time, And I believe that the world will respond to this live recording, because the band is so swinging. And so I threw it out there, and, it seems like people are getting it, So I feel very, very fortunate. I've had a fortunate career, going all the way back to performing the last 5 years with my father, and then a successful run, 28 years chairing the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz. Then, I had hit records as an R&B artist, and then my jazz career really didn't start till I was 42 years old. And I said, America doesn't like you switching horses at midstream. But I said, I'm going to switch horses because my father told me, don't be scary. So I said, I ain't going to be scary. I'm going to throw myself out there at 42 as a jazz artist. And the world, accepted that. Had an album of the year in 1998 with Monk on Monk. I've had several #1 jazz records. And it's just been a magic carpet ride for me. My whole life, I woke up as a child and people were saying, do you know who your father is? So, I got no complaints. And right up until today, I had my 72nd birthday last year, and I'm still going strong, and the world seems to like this record. So I'm
in addition to your musical talents, to your skill, I don't know, you probably can't remember, but I'm a musician also. And I've been for 60 years. And I'm playing concerts. And so I'm a sax man growing up, and I play the piano also. I've been doing piano concerts. So, but I'm not so good, but I love music. I ran a jazz festival, Quinnipiac College Jazz Festival in the 70s. And I got to know a lot about jazz in those days. I love jazz. In fact, our jazz band, the big band, I played the Barry in that band, but I got ill and I couldn't go to the Montreux Jazz Festival over there in Switzerland. The Swiss, they love jazz. Europe loves jazz.
They love it.
So when you saying two continents to me, and then we have our Monterey with Jimmy Lyons out on the West Coast and stuff, I know I've been part of the jazz world. In fact, I always thought I would work for Chuck Suber on Downbeat magazine out of Chicago at one point. So I've had some history. I'm only saying that because you're the pinnacle of jazz. Those years ago when you were kind enough to say, yeah, I'll talk about jazz, on the show. That was like, I got the greatest guy in the world. You're coming to talk.
Oh,
And so I never forgot it. And so I got to send it to you because what's
please
beautiful,
do.
yes, what's beautiful about you is that you're still you. And so I'm saying 15 or so, maybe however long that was from when I did that and had that studio on Fifth Avenue, you were still you. Why are you
Yeah.
still you? You still have that young at heart, that educator temperament, that desire to help others, and then share the goodness that you are so appreciative of. Man, you've said your dad's name, whatever, a bunch of times in a blessed. I'm a reverend also, minister, in a blessed way, in a loving way. You grew up nice, right?
I grew up nice, and uh, I have always said, I owe, I owe, I owe. You know, and everything that I've gotten was given to me. And Art Blakey gave me drums. Max Roach gave me his time to hang out, to learn how to play. My father brought me onto his bandstand, you know, and so I've always felt that, any ways, regardless, that I can give back to jazz, whether it's through my music or through my storytelling or through my ability to inspire young musicians, I'm going to do that, because my father was a good guy. He was a good guy. He don't got all that baggage, and I'm not speaking in disparaging ways, but the Miles Davises and Charlie Parkers and Coltrane, they had a different kind of baggage, Thelonious doesn't have any of that baggage. Thelonious was completely into his family. He was a family guy. This enigmatic, thought of as a mysterious guy, was actually very much a family guy. He sent me to the best schools that he could. He took me around the world with him, and so I've always felt that I owe. And jazz has always been fun to me. So many times jazz. Whether it's the Miles Davis movie or Young Man with a Horn or the Billie Holiday story, or all these stories, always there's such a focus on the tragedy of jazz. And I'm saying, even though Bird passed away at 35 years old, from a drug overdose, his life while he was here on this planet was a triumph. The music that he played 70 years ago is still making people smile today. That's a triumph of humanity. And I've been privileged to be around those kinds of artists, whether it was Coltrane coming to the house every day, or Sonny Rollins coming to the house every day, or Miles or Dizzy or any of them. These were triumphs of humanity. And I've always felt that one of my duties, I think, the reason my father sent me to fancy schools but kept me on his leg, was that so that I could convey this, the marvelous, the majesty of the music. I'm just a little drummer. I'm one little drummer in this music. But when you think about what jazz did for America, what it did for the African American community, what it did for racial relations, I mean, it's been a fantastic art form, and I feel very, very privileged to have been part of it, So I'm always enthusiastic about it. I'm always enthusiastic about my father, about his music, his contributions, but also the contributions of so many artisans, whether they were African American or white Americans, whether they were young, whether they were old. I marvel at the contributions of, for instance, a young man that left us fairly recently by the name of Roy Hargrove. You know, I knew Roy Hargrove. He was a fantastic musician, but he was also a very, very sweet guy. You know, I revel in the intellectual acumen of a guy like M. Toomey Heath, Jimmy Heath's son. You know, uh, you know, and it just goes on and on and on. So this has been a good time for me. The whole ride has been a good time for me. And then, you know, the privilege I had to be the chairman of Thelonious Monk, of the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz for 28 years, probably the most impactful jazz education program that the world has ever seen, you know, who gave us the likes of Joshua Redman and Cecile and Marcus Roberts and Jackie Terrison and Jane Monheit and so many great artists. You know, all of that stuff is like, to me, I mean, wow. All I can say is wow. So that's why I tell people all the time, you know what? I'm just a drummer. I'm just a drummer. Drummers are background. You know, I don't mind being in the background when the foreground is all those things I've been enumerating. You know, I'm glad to be in the background, you know, of a Monk Institute, of knowing Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis and John Coltrane and, you know, Max Roach and Art Blakey and Roy Haynes and Elvin Jones, and the list just goes on and on and on and on.
I love every name you said. I'll be frank with you, I know. Percy Heath was on my board.